And then I get to introduce our next featured poet, Jim Carruth. Jim Carruth was born in Johnstone in 1963 and grew up on his parents' dairy farm. After spending a period in Turkey, he returned to live in Renfrewshire. He is one of the founders and current chair of the St. Mungo's Mirror Bowl, a network of Glasgow-based poets, and has been an artistic advisor for Stanza, Scotland's International Poetry Festival. In 2014, he became Glasgow's Poet Laureate. Carruth was awarded a Robert Louis Stevenson Fellowship in 2009 and has been the winner of the James McCash Poetry Competition, the Maclellan Poetry Prize, and the Callum MacDonald Prize. His first pamphlet, Bovine Pastoral, came out in 2004 and was followed by 7 further chapbooks and 3 book-length collections. Killochris, a verse novella tracking the relationship of 2 very different men working on a remote sheep farm, was published in 2015 and was shortlisted for the Saltire Scottish Poetry Book of the Year, the Seamus Heaney Centre for Poetry Prize, and the Fenton Aldeburgh Prize for First Collection. Barfield, published in 2023, was the final part of the Auchenseal trilogy, following on from Blackcard and Balefire, which explores the changing rural landscape. And of course, I do a little reflection here as well. And so I found there is a wealth of animals in these poems, farm animals, as may be expected in the work of a poet, also called the Poet Laureate of the Scottish farm life. There are cows, of course, sometimes wayward cows. There's a pig that's whispered to, and I think that's about high time, and a wonderful touching poem about a horse that has died. And that poem especially struck me in how it showed the honor and respect given to a horse and the grief her passing causes, up to an almost ephemeral sighting of a roe. And each of these interactions with animals have a certain softness to them, in contrast maybe to the harshness of farm life that also shines through, as if the people in the poem sometimes feel more comfortable around the straightforwardness of animals. And still, these are also poems that are thriving in relationships, that explore how we are around each other, what is said and what isn't said, whether it's about a gamekeeper's daughter luring a lover, about a boy watching a girl, or a father and a son. And somehow it seems to me that the lines describing the encounter with the roe go for all human-to-human encounters as well, when it says, one of us is too frightened to move for what they sense but cannot see, the other scared to breathe for fear of losing what they have right now. So these are poems that live in the in-between, in the liminal space of what's said and what must be inferred, what's there and what's not, or what is no longer, or forever quite beyond our grasp. So Jim, I'm also dying to know, who is your poetic hero and why?
It's similar to Lynn. I could easily have picked Kathleen Jamie last week. It varies from week to week. Currently, the poet I've been spending a bit more time with is William Carlos Williams. His collection, Spring and All, and I've got this sort of modern version of it, is 100 years old this year. And the idea of looking back at it and looking at, to me, it still is fresh and clear as it was when it was written. It's still current. That interesting, for example, I think there's a sort of pared down speech or natural speech that is sort of something that we'd aim for. And I think with any hero, you think, oh, I wish I'd written that, you know. And there's plenty of poems with William Carlos Williams saying, I wish I could have written that. And they're in some ways they're very clear, very simple. But is that unwrapping a bit again what Lynn said about Kathleen Jamie's? You know, there's an access, you're in immediately, and then you can spend time with the poem. And I think that's true of William Carlos Williams as well. And I think his background in being a doctor, there's an empathy in there. And again, you think, you know, there's things in there that, you know, I want to learn from. You know, that idea about, you know, capturing human relationships, which I think, Mila, you'd mentioned. That's, you know, something for me to aim for as well. So it's that sort of raising the bar, and you think, no, how'd I get there?
Oh, I think you're very close there. I mean, and please take us into your poetry.
No problem. As it was mentioned, just a wee, this is Farfield, and it was the third book of a trilogy that's taken me 25 years to complete. So I'm not necessarily a fast writer, but I was taking on. I was listening to Lynn's first poem. I've not written my poem for that commission yet, Lynn. So I'm trying to hide from Alan Reich until I write the poem. So it's a work in progress. So I haven't got that poem to share with you. But yes, we've been given a deadline to hit, so we're both on it. But I did want to read a couple of poems about art to begin with. In this new book, there's 9 poems that use a painting as a starting point, and the paintings are by the Glasgow Boys, and that was a group of artists that were around late 19th century. And at one phase of their development, they wanted to spend a lot more time in rural communities trying to capture what they would see as the natural environment and those that were working the land. One of the poets was James Guthrie, and he did a painting called The Hind's Daughter, which is about a young girl working in the fields. And she wasn't overly impressed with the painting, so he offered her a draft of it, and she threw it away. And I thought, well, that's a good bit of feedback to the artist. But this first poem, A Hind's Daughter, is from the perspective of the sitter, of that young girl, A Hind's Daughter. Left on this canvas, ragged dark fringe, earth skin, clothed in rough hand-me-downs, caught in an everyday chore, forever a scowl. I was chosen for this task, one from 8, to stand for hours through an east wind chill, one hand frozen to the handle of blade glint, the other holding the ribbed cabbage stalk, for nothing but his mother's bread and milk, and this painting that does not show me true. So that was a wee bit of feedback for her. Another second poem is again a response to Glasgow Boys painting. The Gamekeeper's Daughter was a painting by A.E. Walton. And I've got a long epigraph for the poem, and it's an excerpt of a review of Lady Chatterley's Lover that was given in the Field and Stream in November 1959. This fictional account of the day-to-day life of an English gamekeeper is of considerable interest to outdoor-minded readers, as it contains many passages on pheasant raising, the apprehending of poachers, ways to control vermin, and other chores and duties of the professional gamekeeper. Unfortunately, one is obliged to wade through many pages of extraneous material. The Gamekeeper's Daughter. As hounds yelp distant on the moor, he will use his poacher's map, tiptoeing past traps in the wood, to reach an unlocked cottage door. The coat hooks are empty, boots gone, but he smells her father everywhere. Still the lure is great. She calls and he follows, undressing fast like the thrashing of a salmon. He slips in closer to his singing prey. Her body lies still, skin soft as fawn. Her song is of the trapped and sprung. The way she raises her eyebrow with the gentle lifting of the latch is the look of hunter, not hunted. As Mila also mentioned in her excellent introduction, this is a poem about a young man taken by the ploughing skills of a young woman, as you do, earthstruck. The neighbour's son, whose words were a stumble on rough ground, whose cack-handedness at simple chores drew the anger of his father's fists, once watched her all day over the dike, ploughing that one field set for barley. Becoming used to his stare, she turned her own gaze back to the depth of soil before bedrock, that one boggy corner, the tricky curves and angles of slopes, but would catch his stooped silhouette, his head's ragged hedge fenced in by her wing mirrors as she swung the tractor around at the headland. He stood at the edge of his known world, followed her from the dropping of the blade for her first furrow, till in failing light, the lifting of it for the last time. Speechless at each line drawn on the land, straight, uninterrupted, confident, true. Currently, I'm back working on the family farm every afternoon, and one of those regular tasks I do is to bring in the cows, and this is a poem, at least on the surface, about bringing in the cows. There are days when you come to fetch them, and they are nowhere to be seen. The brae, empty of cattle, offers a blank face. Your hope is that they stand somewhere beyond the rise of the field, where it stretches down to reach the marsh. You send the collie up and over the ridge, so he too disappears from view, and you're left with nothing to bring home. More and more urgent, each command given to send the working dog right and left, and away back across a field out of sight. Though you whistle or shout until hoarse, the hill offers not one word back. No bark or bellow, and all seems lost. You are searching for what you cannot see, seeking the return of that which might already have disappeared. You long for one strong, thick head rising above the crest, a signal for the rush of the herd to come. That was the cow poem. Now this is the horse poem. My father-in-law was a great lover of heavy horses, Clydesdales and working horses, and there's clearly a bit of my father-in-law in this poem, MacIntyre's Big Horse. When the horse died, we all brought a shovel, joined Mac at the back of the paddock to dig the grave and relive her life. And we did so for hours. It was not a burden, for she was without doubt a great horse. We watched again as she grew from foal to yearling, to a mare 18 hands high. We recalled each field she had ploughed, the shows she won, the offspring she bore. Completing our labours in the dark, we were glad to walk her journey again, with Mac, a willing guide. We all cried. When Mac himself died, a decade later, the service was led by a visiting priest in a rush to be somewhere else. He used Mac's Sunday name that nobody recognised, led us in hymns that nobody knew, and in 5 sentences read out a stranger's life. At the cemetery, Mac's only living relative took time to shake hands with his lawyer. They filled in his grave with a JCB. And this is an elegy for my father, gone out. Robert Carruth, 1937, 2013. September nights from my youth, when you'll half finish your tea, rush back out to the cows on the hill, to monitor the pregnant mothers, make sure you were there to safeguard each calf's first few minutes on earth. And though I pleaded to go with you, mother would tell me it was too late, struggling with tantrums and tears. Not brave enough to say no to my face, you would just sneak out the back door, slip your boots on, whisper to the collies. Today, I arrive at your hospital bed. Silent, weak, you will never waken. Without a goodbye, you leave me again. Somewhere beyond the cries of loved ones, you're walking your dogs in that far field, watching the herd, waiting for the next life. And now the deer, 2 poems to go, and now the deer poem, as and again, this is the local wood, and I've watched deer throughout my whole life, and I think during lockdown, these sorts of moments in terms of relationships with nature were much clearer and much more important. So this is an encounter with a roe deer. Roe. I wasn't tracking, rather saw you by chance in the clearing, but I love fresh snowfall in the forest, following the journeys of others, refugees from the chill northerlies, foraging for grass, leaves, berries. Between the trees, the first flash of white, a heart-shaped rump, hen-slithe body of doe. You raise your head skywards, black nose, large ears alert to clues. Winter has taken away your gold-red coat, left you dull brown, short hair rippled by ribs. Now fully grown, how small your kind remain. A short life too, first spotted a few years ago, a sleeping fawn leaning on your mother. You will not see out 10 years in this wood. Soon I'll walk here with your absence. But what does that mean for us today? One of us is too frightened to move for what they sense but cannot see. The other, scared to breathe for fear of what they have right now. And I'll finish with this, and thanks again for the invite for Stephanie and Mila, and thanks to Lynn as well. And this is my son. My eldest son is now a forester, and he encourages me to plant trees as often as he can, a willing volunteer. And this is one of the experiences, planting aspen saplings. Planting aspen saplings, father and son. Though I might not live to see them grow to full height. Their grey bark covered in lichen, flowering catkins in the spring, or listen to their leaves tremble at the slightest breeze. Son, you're quick to share the story of this native's decline, how this is where it belongs, a wet moorland on the west. You talk of the nature of roots, the unseen suckers underneath, how colonies from a single seed can endure 1,000 years, even sending up new trunks in a forest fire's charred aftermath. You tell me of the tree's offer to gall midges, birds, hare, deer, the importance of relationships, the interconnectedness of everything. They do not thrive in shade, need light and space to grow. Planting aspen saplings, son and father. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those beautiful poems.